have been asked to talk about the role of international networks of cancer care. And of course, cancer care and cancer research, they are more or less integrated in what we're talking about. And then I would like to first say that despite we have a lot of progress in research and in clinical activities, the cancer problem is increasing over decades. And we can also look into the future and see that the increase will continue. At present, we have about 20 million new cancer patients per year, and about half of them, 10 million, pass away due to the disease. So we have an increase in cancer problem, and I would say we have main challenges. European Academy of Cancer Science organized together with the Pontifical Academy in the Vatican, I think about 3 weeks ago, a conference where we tried to discuss and update strategies in order to decrease the cancer problem. And we could say that there are 4 things necessary, and that is to decrease the incidence, to increase the cure rate, to improve survival if cure is not possible, and then the 4th, improve health-related quality of life. That is very important. A prerequisite for this is a well-developed translational cancer research. I have showed to you last year with the definition about the translational cancer research. And we have this definition since about 2005, where we say that we need a coherent research continuum from basic cancer biology into preclinical research, further into early clinical research, into late clinical research, further into adoption by the healthcare system, and evaluation of outcomes of innovations, and long-term follow-up together with health economics. So we need to see this coherent continuum, and we see that we have a number of gaps in this continuum. We need to bridge the gaps. We have a similar continuum for prevention, also a little bit different, but in principle the same, from basic preclinical research into prevention research, identify prevention context, implementation, and follow-up regarding outcomes and health economics. We talked very much about personalized cancer vaccine, and I'm happy that you, Professor Bank, talk about personalized cancer medicine, because we started with that also many years ago, and after some time there was a suggestion from US to turn over to precision cancer medicine. And we now go back to the definition of strategy by Leroy Gould, which is about 20 years old, on P4 cancer medicine, where we see that cancer medicine should be predictive. And I think the predictive component here is of extreme importance, because it should be predictive for development of prevention, for development of personalized treatment of patients, and also for quality of life research, where it's important that the patients are participatory. I think these 4 components is what we should discuss, and that will cover our aims much better than just talk about precision cancer medicine. And we agreed on that when we had the meeting in the Vatican 3 weeks ago. Clinical trials are an important part of the continuum, and it's a complex area which needs to be still better sorted out than it is today. The traditional way to look at the clinical trials doesn't work. We have still the clinical trials with the innovations coming from the basic preclinical research. And this is very important, above all, for centers with linked to basic preclinical research. But then the further process very much moves into next generation clinical trials with stratification of patients. And it could be targeted drugs, but it could also be, as we have heard, immunological treatment of different types. We need, after that, have comparative clinical trials in order to have innovations studied enough for implementation. And then we need the implementation research that should be structured. And to achieve the next generation clinical trials, molecular tumor boards would be very important. And it's not possible to have a molecular tumor board in each center. So here we need collaborations. We need to separate the words clinical efficacy. Efficacy is the outcomes of clinical trials on selected patients. Why we need, in the long run, the clinical effectiveness. How does it work when we treat all patients? And the clinical effectiveness is an important outcomes assessment and should be linked to health economics. And therefore, we need also the real world data. So if we are talking about collaborations between centers of different types, the clinical trials are very, very important. But we need also to see that all centers cannot have all the infrastructures in place. Therefore, we have to have a collaboration where we also share the most important resources. Molecular tumor boards can serve as an example. If we look upon the different challenges I talked about, identification of causes of cancer, and we can say that if we implement the present evidence-based knowledge regarding prevention, we may decrease the cancer problem with 50%. There is a general agreement about that. We also see if we use the present possibilities to go further by research, we can increase these effects. HPV vaccination, for instance, is a success story, should be used everywhere. Population-based screening for early detection is important, both for invasive cancer, but also for the true precursor lesions, if you would go for early detection prevention. And therefore, this part is more complex because we need more cancer biology to identify the relevant precursor lesions. The other thing to achieve something is to increase the cure rate. And that is a very complex challenge. And we heard about the complexity in the clinical trials and the new types of clinical trials, stratification of patients, immunological cell therapy, etc. And we need strategies to solve the problem with genomic instability of cancer cells. That is a key issue because you have an enormous crosstalk between molecular pathways in the cells. And if you treat them with targeted therapies, for instance, they switch by crosstalks the molecular pathway and they are receiving resistance. We need to work more with combinations of targeted anti-cancer. People work very much with single drug treatment, but we need to find strategic combination and test them. And I think immuno-oncology, as we heard about, has a very good chance actually to move on and increase in the long run also the cure rate. But very important is treatment at an early stage of the disease. That means that we need to develop the diagnostic technologies for early detection of metastatic disease and bring in such patients in clinical trials. And we need also to identify better the reasons for failing treatment. And here we have the reverse translational research, which is important. When we go for the clinical trials, we can take biopsies from patients, go back into molecular analysis. Today we can analyze the genome in single cells. We can do this by fine needle biopsies, and we can relate that to the clinical outcome. So this is a very difficult area, but I think the research overall has to focus more on the cure of patients with disseminated disease. And in the present situation, we try to increase survival for patients with incurable disease. And the problem here is that it converts cancer to a chronic disease. And that is a problem for the healthcare systems over time. We can see already that the prevalence of the cancer patients who have received a diagnosis and have been treated is increasing over time. And the patients have problems, they are dependent on the healthcare system. We have another thing with the linked to the prevalence here, and that is the patients treated but probably cured. They also have enormous side effects after treatments, and too little research is involved regarding the side effects of anti-cancer agents. So systemic treatment of patients with disseminated or incurable disease is one of the main activities in cancer centers, but it should be better structured. Overall, that was the conclusion we had, and we need to see also the possibility to bring in, as we heard from Professor Dang, new technologies and test them. But I also say, go back and treat patients as early as possible. An area which is not very visible is health-related quality of life research. It needs more visibility or more support, and I'm happy that here the European Commission has listened to the European Academy of Cancer Sciences and other organizations, because we need to prevent, we need to increase cure, we need to prolong life for patients, but whatever we do, we need to look for the well-being of patients. And here we have a lot of activities of extreme importance, also for research and collaborations between centers and clinics. And that is how to deliver the optimal supportive care, how to handle psycho-oncology, how to handle rehabilitations, the early palliative care of incurable patients with incurable disease. Here it's important to integrate the possibility to prolong life and with the health-related quality of life. And here it is of extreme importance to understand that we need not only stratify the patients regarding the tumor biology, we need also stratify the patients depending on their healthcare, comorbidities, age, etc. So this is a big area that should be better visible. And of course, the late palliative care is also an area where we need innovations. And last, the survivorship. We have an increasing number of patients with long-term side effects and chronic cancer disease. It's important to see for translational cancer research, the clinical therapeutics care is the important infrastructure. So we need to see the healthcare as the important infrastructure for the researcher. And therefore also the high quality the clinical care is important to define in terms of multidisciplinarity regarding treatment and care, covering the total clinical pathway. And you can be very good if you establish this today, but in 5 years, things change very much. So we need to have a continuous innovation of the multidisciplinary care. Education is an important factor also here. So research and education should be integrated with multidisciplinary treatment. So we have different types of organizations for the cancer activities. We have the traditional cancer clinics. We have the comprehensive cancer networks. In EU projects, people have suggested that is a possibility, or they call it clinical cancer centers. The goal, however, which all agree upon, is the comprehensive cancer centers. And the comprehensive cancer centers should be linked to cancer clinics and activities in the defined outreach area to quality assure what is going on, but also to create innovation, and that means research, and by that involve patients in research. So coming back to the necessity to work in networks, this is a step moving in this direction. Link clinics, because in the future, when we have the development we see today, we need more patients. And I would like to say about the cancer continuum again, that the basic innovations in basic preclinical research, they are very effective and quick. What takes time is to study the innovations in the clinical setting. So we need to find a way to speed up the clinical part of the translational research. And therefore, we need collaborations and more patients. The comprehensive cancer center is defined as just take some water. I'm talking too much. It has to deliver cancer therapeutics care, which is multidisciplinary. It has to deliver health-related cancer prevention. It should integrate research with the clinical activities. It should have responsibility for education. The comprehensive cancer centers with integrating basic and preclinical research is the fundamental infrastructure for a complete translational cancer research. And I think all agree upon this definition. There are inequality problems in the healthcare, and you see it in your countries. We see it in all countries, more or mindre. We see it still more if we go to other continents. And that is that we don't deliver the optimal high quality treatment and care that is multidisciplinary and which is innovated continuously. That means we need the quality assured CCC. EU now has a program trying to establish at least 100 CCCs that will be quality assured in EU. I think that's an interesting step forward, and that is an interesting step for the Central Eastern Europe Academy of Oncology also to move into this direction. The problem here is that the majority of patients are not living in the catchment area of a CCC. And we looked at that in several countries. Germany is an example. Germany has 14 CCCs which are accredited. But if we look at the catchment areas for the CCCs, they take only about 20% of the total patients. So 70 to 80% are not treated or diagnosed by the CCC. And this is important for two things. One is that we will in the future have increasing needs of advanced technological resources. You cannot have them everywhere because they are too costly. And a lot of patients are outside the CCC, and how to quality assure treatment and care and deliver innovative treatment and care. This is a very important question that was discussed quite a lot at the Vatican meeting we had, and that will also be discussed further in front of the next frame program in the European Union. Another factor which is important if we go to inequality is that when we look at the research continuum for translational research, we see that in some areas we have fairly good activities. In other areas, activities are suboptimal. In some areas, there are even missing use. And we can say that prevention research having an enormous potential to decrease the cancer problem receives, and I said it 1 year ago when we met, receives only 7 to 10% of the total research budget globally. So here it's not the interest we want from funding bodies to support prevention research. So we need to work more for that. The preclinical and early clinical research is very important. We had a meeting 2 years ago when we discussed the importance to have a better interaction between basic preclinical researchers and clinical researchers in order to prioritize what should go further into translational research. Implementation research is the main problem for prevention development. That was a conclusion from another EU project we have. So we need to structurally implement what we identify in the clinical and prevention translational research. As I said, health-related quality of life research should be more supported than it is today, and should be more involved in the clinical trials, for instance, more involved in the clinical activities regarding all treatment modalities. The outcomes research, if you go to outcomes regarding innovations, is almost not existing. And we have to set up systems to evaluate outcomes regarding innovations. And for this you need huge amounts of patients, and here you need collaborations between centers. And I would also say about quality of life research, you can speed up this activity enormously if you will go for the collaboration between centers and clinics. Another missing element is health economics research. In a situation when the costs for the cancer care is increasing dramatically, we have no clear picture of the health economics, and that must be in place. We spend quite a lot of discussions on outcomes research, implementation research, health economics, and I will come also to later on economic support for the research at the Vatican meeting. We all know that we have increasing problems with costs for cancer therapeutics care. And the Institute of Health Economics analyzed the costs over around 20 years, and they could see that there is an increase in cost. They looked upon cost for the direct cost of cancer care and treatment minus medical treatment. And they could see that there were almost no increase in costs, despite increasing number of patients. The costs came to the anti-cancer agents. And it turned out that about 40% or more than 40% over the last 20 years increase is dependent on the use of anti-cancer agents or different types. And that goes back to the increasing number of new anti-cancer agents accepted by FDA and EMA on a fast track. They started with a fast track the last years of the 90s in order to speed up marketing of new anti-cancer agents. You see, the background is that academic centers sorted out very much of the biology, molecular biology behind medical treatment, and that made it possible for the pharmaceutical industry to quickly move in and produce a lot of new anti-cancer agents. They didn't want to test them in the way we were used to do it if we go back in time, to have evidence-based treatment when we approach the patient. They went for the fast track, and now investigation of almost 200 new agents that had appeared over the last 25 years, compared to about 1 or 2 new agents every year earlier. It turned out that we have minimal effects or description regarding evidence. So we need to go back, and that is an important academic issue, and all agree upon that. We need to have a way to assess the effects of the new anti-cancer agents, which are used on patients for early palliative care. So here we have 2 main problems. This induces huge costs for the healthcare, increasing costs, and you see it everywhere in the world. And since treatment outcomes are poorly evidence-based, this is actually also a severe ethical problem. But that is something which needs collaborations between centers, work with large amounts of patients, have good technologies to do it, and there are good technologies, but they are not implemented enough so far. If we come to the critical mass program, if we listen to what is going on about all regarding medical treatment of patients, we see that we have a number of diagnostic subgroups with variable clinical consequences due to the different cancer biology. Also, as I said, the patient population is highly variable. They got a genetic background, age, additional diseases, frailty, etc. So we need to take that in consideration when we will move into recommendations on evidence-based medicine. We see that we need more complex technologies. We are just at the beginning regarding stratification technologies for patients for treatment. And that can only be developed in selected CCCs, let's say in our case over Europe. So we need more collaborations also between advanced CCCs, less advanced CCCs, and other cancer clinics. And no single CCC has a critical mass of patients and biological specimens for innovative translational research. That is also an additional conclusion. So we need to stimulate national first and then international collaboration between CCCs, but that means that it should start also with clinics of different size and different levels, with cancer clinics that are developed more or less for clinical research, having also the clinical trials units that are fairly tuned between centers. And the next step will be collaboration between centers as international collaborations, and also between different parts of the world must increase in future if we'll have an effective development. So it's if we are looking at what is going on in Central Eastern Europe, I think your start here is of extreme importance, because you can unify the people, cancer community in a number of countries, and you can successively develop more and more, and several of your centers are strong regarding basic and early clinical research, and you have the possibility to involve also less developed centers in order to have patients' availability for your activities. I think this is very important, because now funding mechanisms are discussed very much, critically discussed, because the European Commission is aware of that funding mechanisms are not adapted to the goals of mission-oriented cancer. We have a mission in cancer, it's fairly well defined, both regarding research and the relevant infrastructure, but funding is not adapted. Instead, when people investigate funding, they say that main funding for cancer research is provided by for-profit organizations, mainly the pharmaceutical industry. So there is a strong pressure now on EU to increase not-for-profit funding. Academic centers should set the agenda for the translational research. And I'm very happy, because we had also at the Vatican meeting representatives from charities who see this problem and would like to go together and also support the academic research. So to end up here, I would say a long-term goal for all of us regarding the translational research, that is to increase innovation and decrease inequalities. And we can do both of them if we organize our activities in a good way. We need to establish evidence-based prevention and therapeutics care. We should look, where do we not have evidence-based? We are good regarding primary treatment. We are less good when we have recurrent treatment, and we have patients who are moving towards palliative care. We need to establish structures for outcomes research in terms of clinical effectiveness. We need to involve health economics research and assess cost effectiveness. We need to increase national and international comprehensive cancer center collaborations, and sharing of resources will increase innovation and decrease inequality. And that means if we have the CCCs, one per about 4.5 million inhabitants, we have a lot of activities around such a CCC that has to go into collaborations with the CCCs. And we also see the opportunities for Central Eastern Europe to go also more in collaboration with centers in Western Europe in order to use the twinning system that is tested for a few centers so far. Education, of course, is a big challenge to reach this. So that is where I conclude. We have the main vision and goal long term, but we will have to work together to come there. Thank you very much.